Hey guys, John Ryan here, and welcome to my first extended-length podcast called Must Know People. It's a local podcast where local people are the stars. Now, before we jump into this week's episode, if you know someone who you think we should be talking to on the pod, let us know. You can always email me at john@carrollbroadcasting.com. That's John with an H, by the way. john@carrollbroadcasting.com. And with that, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it, and enjoy this week's episode of Must Know People. Hey everybody, it's John. We're back with another episode of Must Know People. We've been trying to line this one up for a long time. Had a couple of misfires there, couldn't quite get together enough, but he's here today, and I couldn't be more thrilled. Scott Siepker's here with us.
Hello, John. It's I'm glad this finally worked out. So the audience knows we had this scheduled maybe 3 months ago, and I didn't show up. Mm-hmm. We were going to do it at my house in Mount Carmel, my mom's house, I should say. Mm-hmm. It is the house that my grandmother grew up in. And today, actually, we're celebrating her 90th birthday party.
Nice.
Which is why I'm back in Carroll County. And so certainly Lakeview is not too far away from Mount Carmel.
I had a great conversation with your mom, though.
Yes, and my mom is, she's a burgeoning superstar. That's my hope, at least. Eventually, yes, her charisma of being a small-town lady will eventually just make her world famous.
Yep, she kept going, well, I have no idea where he's at.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I can contact him. So.
She grew up with me being absent-minded, and I've gotten so much better over the course of my life, but I am inherently absent-minded, and so I just have to work extra hard at it, and it's one of the things my mom, I think, is still a little perplexed about with me, is how can you do what you do and you lose your billfold all the time?
You can't find this.
I know. And no joke, I can't believe this, but 2 nights ago I was at Gillian Welch at Hoyt Sherman Place, seeing that concert, and guess what I did? I lost my billfold while I was there.
That happens to me all the time.
I had to go back and get it.
My wife and I go out to dinner all the time. I said, honey, got bad news for you. Wallet's in on the dresser at home. So.
You're paying.
Yep, you're picking up the tab on this one. So let's talk about it. You grew up in Mount Carmel. Tell me about that. What was it like? I mean,
Mount Carmel, I think, is the best place to grow up. And I know that sounds hyperbolic, but I feel like I got so lucky living there because we could get into the right kind of trouble. I think there's trouble kids should get into. Now, I don't have kids, so I can say this easily right now. But then there's those trouble you shouldn't get. When you're living in Mount Carmel, which is at that time, I was a paper boy. I did a census in 3rd grade, very official. And I figured out that it was 101 people and 26 pets. That was what Mount Carmel was. And we just rode our bikes everywhere. Now, granted, we only have 7 stop signs, I think. So it wasn't there wasn't a lot of action.
Far.
No. But we NASCAR was big when I was growing up, Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt. So we made different tracks. We made Darlington in one little place. We made Talladega around the big loop of Mount Carmel. And growing up, I mean, ultimately it's where I learned what it is to be a good neighbor. And essentially, when you grow up in Mount Carmel, your neighbors are your family. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be too cheesy about it, but that's just true. And since Dad died 10 years ago, Mom's still living in the same house in Mount Carmel, and that town of Mount Carmel has just turned out for her, has become her network of family. Everybody looks out for everybody else. Me and my brother, we both live in Des Moines. And, you know, it's to have... I feel so indebted to the folks of Mount Carmel. Yeah. I wouldn't be the person I am today, John, without them. And I certainly, I wouldn't feel as comfortable about my mom's happiness level if she wasn't surrounded by the great folks there.
Do you try to explain that to people that are like from bigger cities or wherever you've traveled to? You've traveled to Japan.
Yeah.
Say, here's how I grew up. And they're like, I don't even understand that.
I give a lot of different keynote speeches. And growing up in Mount Carmel is a huge part of what I talk about, because I can't tell people, I can't explain who I am without telling them what Mount Carmel was like. When I was growing up there, there was no convenience store or grocery store or store. We had nothing. The only thing that we had there for, I guess, economic value, I suppose besides the church, was the pop shop. It was run by Miss Fleskis, and the pop shop was not a real business. It was just the back part of Miss Fleskis's house, and she would leave the door unlocked, and then there's a refrigerator in there and a little bowl, and you put a quarter in the bowl, and you could take a pop. And so once a day, me and my brother and the Tigges, with the gang running around Mount Carmel, we'd go, and on the honor system, we'd get a pop from Mrs. Fleskis's. And so that right there tells you the environment in which I was able to have my most formative years.
It's funny because you couldn't get away with anything. I mean, there was 107 parents, basically.
Oh, yeah. And Kevin Tigges, who lives next door to me, or when I was growing up there, Kevin, he was one of these incredible guys. He's worked for Mackey Motors in Lake City for 30-plus years. I'm sure people listen to this. Some of you might even know who he is. But he's one of these old-time guys who somehow had enough spies in every corner of Carroll County. So if you did anything, it didn't matter if you were in Coon Rapids. It didn't matter. It was going to get back to him, and he was going to come up, and he was going to confront you about it. So you knew that the little spies were out everywhere, and Kevin Tigges was really plugged in.
Social media was not needed back then.
Absolutely not. I honestly have no idea how Kevin Tigges found out about some of the things that we did.
Who were the bigger influences when you were growing up there? I mean, obviously your mom and dad, they're huge influences, but who else that really kind of impacted your life that you look back now and go, thank God they were in my life?
Oh, yeah. So I talk about sort of the Mount Rushmores of parental male and female figures in my life. And certainly, of course, my parents are on there. But Kevin Tigges, as I just mentioned, he's my second father. He's one of these guys who just knows how to do anything practically. He is the quintessential common sense American. And he is my father was much more loud and much more of a gambler. He's
where the outgoing side
yes,
comes
he was.
into play.
Yes,
because I don't see your mom being that.
No, mom is much more be behind the scenes, and a lot of ways she had to play second fiddle for most of her life, and so she took that role on. It's been nice to see since Dad has passed away. She has taken her wings have spread out a little bit more, and she's been traveling by herself and just getting out there and being like, gosh, I have a whole second life that I have to live here, or that I get to live here, and so it's been wonderful. One of the better things I've seen in my life is just my mom growing into this wonderfully complex and layered woman.
Mm-hmm. Have you always been really outgoing and things like that? Because, I mean, you could walk in front of a crowd and you're totally comfortable.
No. Unfortunately, when I was growing up in Mount Carmel, I was going, Christ the King was, the school was going, not the person. Christ the King school was going, not that long ago. First through fourth grade was in the Mount Carmel school, which we still had there. And then 5th through 8th grade, we'd come to Breda, and we would finish up there, and then everybody my class of 25 would then go to Kemper. But I was the only one in my class who went to Carroll High. And part of the reason is that I had to, I don't know if special ed's the right word, but in 2nd grade, I had to, with a couple of the other kids in my class of 25, we had to leave the school building and go over to Miss Fleskis's pop shop, where she would teach us reading, math, spelling were big problems for me. And so I got special attention, if you will, having to leave the school and walk the entire block over to, which is half the distance of Mount Carmel, by the way.
But when you're a little kid, it's a
long ways. And so I struggled with sort of socially. I struggled academically. And so even though it was a class of 25, I tell people that I was, in popularity, I was like 24th. It was like, it was a struggle. And so when I ended up going, and I tried to be liked, and I was one of those kids who tried too hard, and I had this flash temper, and I was scared of everything, John. I was scared.
Really?
I was so terrified that the wind was always a tornado, So, and I would hide under my parents, either under, if during the day I would hide under my parents' blankets in their bed, or at night I would just hide under mine. I was just scared of it.
Yeah.
I was scared that the haze on the horizon was pollution, or that I was always going to get an ingrown toe. I was a neurotic child, we shall say.
You had a very active mind.
You know what? That's the best. That's the most polite way to say it I've ever heard. So thank you. Yes.
How long did it take you to deal with like the issues around your reading? And
Yeah.
things like
So
that?
I eventually, when I chose to go to Carroll High, which was in a small town, was sort of a big deal because my mom and dad had both went to Kemper. My brother was going to go to Kemper. It seemed pretty clear. He's 3 years younger than me. And my 70,000 aunts and uncles all went to
Yeah.
Kemper as well. And to be in a class of 25 and not go meant when I showed up at Carroll High School and now a class of 155 and I didn't know anybody, I had to redefine myself, and it was quite a laborious process. At first, I don't want. This isn't a sob story, but I was bullied pretty hard. I took ag classes because I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, which were combo classes with the Kemper kids. So the Kemper kids were extra awful to me, and the Carroll High's kids weren't very nice either. So I pretty much for the first part of my high school career didn't have any friends. I had to sit at the loser table at work, at lunch, and I could say that because I was a loser, and it was just rough. And then eventually I figured out that instead of letting everybody else define me, I need to figure this out. I need to define myself. Now, I didn't know that at the time, but I realize now. And so what I did was, at Kemper, you could not have chewing gum. Or at Christ the King when I was in elementary school, but you could at Carroll High. And I noticed everybody was always asking each other for a piece of gum. So I started carrying chewing gum with me at all times. And what happened was everybody, whether you were cool or a loser, you needed a piece of gum, and I was there. So I now started, long before I was the Iowa Nice guy, I was the chewing gum guy.
Yeah.
Because nobody knew me as Scott Siepker. Siepker's too hard to... You can't. It's Ziepka, or Skypker or Skeepker or whatever. Nobody could pronounce it, but chewing gum guy, that was pretty easy. So I finally kind of got my foot in the door with being able to show that I'm a nice person, and slowly but surely also sort of figured out being funny. Not really, but what I did figure out the most was being a really good listener, John, to all the most attractive women in my class.
There you go.
And I all of a sudden became the guy who was put squarely in the friend zone, but I was friends with all the popular girls. And so that sort of switched my high school experience. And
it's funny because I interviewed Eric Noggle a couple of weeks ago, and he had kind of that same experience. And it honestly, this could be any school, anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's Carroll High, Kemper, whatever. You switch schools and you go to a different one, you're that outsider. And it's funny how that everybody has that similar story if they have that.
And I'm not the person I am today if I don't make that decision as an 8th grader to do that. I still don't know how, because I was such a scared kid, as we talked about. Somehow I was able to know that I shouldn't do that. Now, I've done a lot of therapy, John, and I've actually found out that the truth of the reason that I went to Carroll High was because I felt bad about how much my parents would have to pay if I went to Kemper. But even though I made the decision based off of that as an 8th grader, it turned out to be one of probably the most important and best decision I ever made in my life.
Is that a true story? I mean,
that's absolutely true. Honestly,
really?
yeah. It
as
took
an
me probably
8th grader, you're concerned about the finances for your parents.
It took me 20 years to remember this. But yeah, I remember like getting out a calculator and typing it down. I would also do the same thing for a variety of other things my parents were spending money on, and I have just this deep neuroses about being in the way, and I'm so lucky to live now in a time where mental health is something that people actually talk about. Because my dad, I could tell, my dad's been passed away for 10 years, but I look now at how anxious I get about things, and I project back, and so maybe I'm just projecting, but when I look back, I should say, my dad, I can see, had some of the same things as me, but he was working at Pella Roll Screen for 30 years in a factory. He was around guys of that generation who
Yeah.
didn't talk about their feelings. And I think I probably would have ended up being more like my father if I didn't have the opportunity to talk about how kind of nuts I was or am still. My therapist,
I shouldn't laugh at
yeah,
any of
no,
this.
no, do laugh. It is funny. We have to laugh at these things. My therapist says, and I love this line, that I am the most confident neurotic she's ever met.
There you go.
And she's been doing this for 30 years, so I feel very, very good about pulling that one out.
So is that how you wound up in like theater and doing things like that? Because you tried the sports and things like that. You did play some sports.
So golf was the thing that I loved, and I was able to, if I may brag a little bit, I was first team all conference my senior year.
Nice.
Thank you. Now don't look up what I shot at state golf, but
That is irrelevant.
Irrelevant. And then I played basketball, and that's we could do just a podcast on just my basketball stories, but because I was the kid who sat on the bench, and they gave me the Smile Award at the end of the year, which was, they had to give the seniors some award, and since I went 2 for 5 inside the arc my senior year, which means I scored 4 total points. We won every game I played in, though, John.
All right.
Adam Haleska was on my team, but they gave me the Smile Award.
Yeah, you carried him the whole time?
That's what I say. I pushed him in conditioning is my claim to fame, at least what I try to be my claim to fame. But I did that, but when I got into theater, actually was more one of the loves of my life. All the girls that were my best friends I was madly in love with. They put me squarely in the friend zone. So I didn't have my first date till my senior year, and that was with a junior. So watch out. But but mostly I got involved because Dr. Paulson had a daughter named Kelsey Paulson, and she was my best friend. I was madly in love with her. She was homecoming queen, and she was in large group speech. And so I thought, well, if Kelsey's in large group speech, I'll audition. And so I did, and then I got not put in her group, I got put in her sister's group. So it didn't work out at all. But
Best laid plans.
But where I did kind of find I had sort of a natural knack for it, and did a little bit, but it wasn't until in college when I took an acting class my sophomore year. I went to Iowa State to become a psychologist because I was so good at listening. I thought I should become a counselor. And then I took an acting class my sophomore year, and it changed my life forever.
Was it instantaneous that it did that, or did it take a little while to absorb in?
When I will never forget the first day of Acting 101, and Patrick Gowron, this little short Irish, first generation Irishman, he said, old school guy. He looked at the wall, he pointed at the wall, and there's nothing written on the wall, but he goes, "No acting allowed. No acting allowed." And I was like, I don't even know what this means. He's like, "No acting allowed." And when I finally came to understand, like, when you are actually good at acting, you are not acting. It changed that really. Now, I was awful, John. I was absolutely awful.
Everybody is, though.
Oh, yes.
Nobody's a natural at that.
I was so absolutely bad, but luckily I found it like unlocked something. I wanted to do it. I think it's because I'm so interested in so many different things that acting, I realized, gave me that opportunity to be a doctor for 6 weeks, or to be a funeral home operator for another 6 weeks, or whatever it means. It scratched all those itches, and so I just fell in love with it.
Isn't it more? I would think it'd be about attention. As you kind of felt invisible in high school a little bit, but here's a great way to draw attention to yourself without actually having to be you.
You should be another life. You should be a
podcast
therapist.
Over.
That is
we're
really
solved.
good. You're absolutely right. I have this desire to be liked, and theater is a great place to get that spotlight. Now, over the years, I've come to see how unimportant being liked actually is, because nobody actually cares all that much about you. I think it's Seneca who says, not Seneca Wallace, but the old Greek philosopher, that we worry more in imagination than we do in reality. Or we suffer. It's suffer.
Yeah.
We suffer more in reality than we do, suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. And that is absolutely true. So I've been able to get more control over that, but we are that same person still, right? Like getting up there. And when I figured out how to do it well, wow. then it was like, this is a way for me to truly express myself. And it just became something that made my life happier. Now, did it make it more hard in other ways? Trying to explain to your father who worked at a factory for 30 years?
So you have to produce something.
Yes.
You have to have something tangible.
Yeah, and that's why I eventually got out of doing theater and realized if I were going to make money at this, I had to become a filmmaker. And so that's how I started doing videos, and that worked out just fine.
Yeah, a little side story. My former father-in-law, I was in radio at the time, and I was dating his daughter, and he's like, "So you're in radio?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, how do you determine how much you make in something like that?" And I said, "It's whatever you can command, whatever." And he looked at me and goes, "Huh." And I knew he did not understand at all. So I'm sure your dad was exactly the same way.
This whole idea, when you grow up in a blue-collar house, my mom worked at the Carroll Can Redemption Center for 25 years. My dad worked at the Pell Roll Screen Factory for 30 till the day he died. And so I had those jobs too. In the summer, I had to work those jobs. And there is a practicality, a common sense that is instilled in you. And I hated working those jobs. I'll be frank. I absolutely hated them. But they are vital to me being, I think, more successful in this artistic world than some other folks, because I do have that understanding that at the end of the day, you have to still be able to produce. And maybe you don't like that thing that you're doing today, but you got to do it. You might have a 14-hour day of grinding, and you got to do it. And so I'm so thankful to my parents who instilled that work ethic into me, and then that not bitching and moaning complaints either. It's like, this is the job. Go do it. Okay?
See, I could launch into a whole thing about the older generation is really judgy about the younger generation now, I think, anyway, like the millennials and all of that, the Gen Zs or whatever. They're like, oh, they're just not like us. They're not interested in doing a good job. And it's like, no, their interests are different. I think that nobody quite gets that. If we got to figure out what motivates them, and then you'll see a whole new side come out to everybody.
Yeah, and I can just feel this now that I'm 41 somehow. I'm 41, and I can feel this about myself looking at the younger generations now. And I remind myself that probably the first humans that figured out fire, the generation before them would look at that generation and be like, psh, they can't be cold. They got to eat their food cooked, and we just like, they're such wusses. When back in my day, we ate the buffalo heart raw.
Yep.
And so I can sense that in myself happening now. But really, as an older generation, we craft the world that we sort of wanted, that we couldn't quite have. And then the next generation comes up, and we've created a little bit more space. And then they take that space maybe a little farther than we originally intended, and we get upset about that. But this is the normal.
It's the way it's supposed to work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I have actually I've tried to stay more in touch with the youth, trying to not fall into that same trap, especially as somebody who is trying to be out there creating content that does appeal not just to my generation, but to an older generation and to a younger generation. You have to be exposed to all of that stuff so that you can get those little references in. And who's busted through? Like, who are the older generation hearing about from the young? And vice versa. Who do the young know about that you could maybe relate? And it's so... I just love being a human. I love what we've been able to do. There's been some terrible things that we have done, absolutely. But I feel at our core, we really are social animals who want to come together. And how do we do that? How do we actually do that is one of those existential problems I try to solve that. Of course I can't.
If you got that answer, you got life nailed right there. So let's talk about, we got to move on to some other things here. Iowa State, was it like college, or was it like high school for you, going to college, or was it a completely different world?
By the time I had finished high school, I'd somehow figured out the popularity game, which is a game, by the way. It is absolutely a way. I figured out how to play it from my freshman year of having no friends to then all of a sudden being on homecoming court with Kelsey Paulson. Oh my God, I can't believe this. And then when I get to college, I'm living in this dorm at Helzer Hall at Iowa State, and it is the best 2 years of my life. The group of guys that just coincidentally got put together turned into being incredible. It was a wide swath of different folks. It was much more diverse than growing up in Mount Carmel and Carroll. And it changed my entire, how I attacked the world, how I approached the world. And a lot of that is I bring back to this moment. It was Christmas, before Christmas, heading off for Christmas, my freshman year of college. So I'm 18. And I'm sitting in the room, one of the dorm rooms at Helzer Hall in Livingston, third floor, strong floor. And I'm talking with my friend Rehan Ali. And I'm like, hey, Rehan, you excited to go home and what are you doing for Christmas? And he's like, Scott, I don't celebrate Christmas. I said, what? What do you mean you don't? He's like,
just dropped a bomb in my world.
Like, I had understood that there were different religions out there, Muslim. I just hadn't really ever had a conversation with a Muslim before, and he's saying, I don't celebrate Christmas, and this blew my, like, again, intellectually I knew this was the case, but emotionally it just never had hit me, and my whole life is built around, as a kid, the excitement around your birthday and Christmas. Now, unfortunately for me, my birthday is 2 days after Christmas. So really only Christmas mattered. So to have that touchstone be so important to my life, and to have somebody be like, we don't celebrate that at all. I immediately got up out of the room and went and talked to our one Jewish friend in Livingston Hall, Michael Hoffenberger, and he's like, I don't celebrate Christmas ever. And this just changed. It was a shock. And so I realized in that moment I had to start not just seeing the world or even just answering questions from my own perspective. But when somebody asked me a question, how would it go from somebody else's perspective? And I picked up a religious studies minor because I got so fascinated by all this. And Dr. Hector Avalos, a professor of mine who when you would take a class with him, he would never let you answer the question from a personal perspective. He would always ask you, I want you to give me this answer from the Jewish perspective and from the Christian perspective, or from the secular perspective and the Buddhist perspective. I don't care in this class what your opinion is. I want you to put yourselves in the shoe of everybody else. Yeah. That has changed how I've just approached life in the last 25 years.
Did that change? I mean, honestly, you can probably look back at that point now and say that affected every one of my projects that I did. Iowa Nice Guy, Kinnick, Hoodoo, what you're doing right now, and some other things.
Absolutely. You can't, at least one of the greatest inventions, maybe the greatest invention that humans have had, is storytelling. It is the thing that connects us. Before we could write things down, the only way we really could connect was sitting around that campfire all those millennia ago, and we would tell stories. And you being able to relate to those other folks in your tribe are so vital to making sure the next hunt, the next day goes better, because you're a little more connected. Maybe you have told that story about the hunt that went poorly. Like, storytelling is so absolutely vital to what sets us apart from all of our other cousins in the animal kingdom. And being able to look at stories from a different perspective allows you to be a good writer. And I don't know if anybody would consider me a good writer, but I'm a better writer because I seek out looking at things from other folks' perspectives so I can tell that story.
That leads exactly into the Iowa Nice Guy video, doesn't it? From that perspective, it brings a whole new little light for me when I see it now, or think back about it. I haven't watched it I watched it when we were first getting set up once again for the interview, but I haven't watched it since. And by the way, just looked it up this morning, 1.5 million views on that one. Huge. So yeah, that perspective, you were looking at everybody else's perspective of Iowa and saying, you're wrong.
You are good at this. Yes, you are a very good interviewer. Thank you. That's a great insight. Yeah, you can't have that without realizing what people think of Iowa, what Iowans think of themselves, what I think of Iowans, what I think of what other people think of Iowans, right? It's all built in there, and when you can tap into it, and I on the original Iowa Nice, one of my original filmmaking partners, Paul Benedict, he grew up in Iowa, up in Pocahontas, not too far off Highway 71, but he has that same sort of empathy that he could really lay in, and he was originally listening to a report about Iowa, and he was like, this can't be what Iowa, this isn't the Iowa I know. And that's when he first came up with the idea for that first script. And it's...
How many different scripts did you go through with that? Was there a lot?
I remember that so well because I was working at Wells Fargo at the time, and Paul emailed me this script that at the time was just called So I Think You Know, ... We didn't... And I start reading the script, and John, I'm crying at my desk. I'm reading it, and I'm laughing so hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so we made a few changes here and there, added a line, whatever, but it was pretty much set. And when I finally figured out how to deliver the line right, because the first take or two, I'll never forget, now this is 12, 13 years ago, we were standing in front of like CNN satellite trucks at the state capitol. This was a couple days before the caucuses, so everybody was in town. And I remember the first couple times I delivered the line, that first line, So I Think You Know Something About Iowa, it just didn't work. And then I go, Paul, actually, wait, let me try something. And I started with this smile on my face. So I think you know something about Iowa. And then I dropped it. And then I said the infamous, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but I said, bleep you. And but I did it with this total deadpan release of the relaxed cheeks, and that moment it was born.
Yep, exactly.
Because it
was shocking.
That moment, yeah. And then it was like, oh, now I know how to deliver these lines, and so it was just one of those moments. And then I am so much. People call me the Iowa Nice Guy, and I love it, and it's awesome, and it's helped me buy a house. Like, I'm not mad about it at all.
Do you still go by that?
It's been interesting. Sometimes I use it, other times I don't. It's been really interesting to see the folks on the street who you yell at, hey, it's the Iowa Nice Guy, or hey, it's Siepker. I could kind of tell, like, people who have listened to the Murph and Andy show for the last 12 years that I've been on, like, generally speaking, if they're yelling out Siepker, either they're from Carroll or they listen to the Murph and Andy show. If they're saying Iowa Nice Guy, or it's the nice guy, or it's the Iowa guy, or whatever it may be, then they've been exposed through my video work and not necessarily the radio. It's been really interesting to see how that goes. I have been, because I'm so neurotic, I kind of ran away from the Iowa Nice Guy name right out of the bat. Especially once we got onto ESPN, I was really worried. I was like, but I'm an actor. I want people to know me for all of my diversity of skills. And, Keith Murphy at the time was just like, you should just stick with this. And I was just a little too pretentious. So I ran away from it for a while. But I've come back full circle, and I embrace it fully. I'm thinking about doing my own podcast here at some point called Iowa Nice. Just because I'm like, gosh, it is a title that people know.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
And James Earl Jones just died.
Mm-hmm.
And he is one of the most established, incredible actors of all forms in any medium ever. And when he got done doing an incredible job on Broadway and winning a Tony, he would go out into the street and people would say, oh, do that line. Luke, I am not your father. Or Luke, I am your father. Do that line. Like James Earl Jones has done all of that, and he's still known by most people as Darth Vader. What am I complaining about?
Yeah. For one line he said in a studio decades ago.
And they're misquoting him, and but it doesn't, like, you.
But that's so iconic. They just love it. And that was the whole F-bomb thing in the Iowa Nice Guy. I did ask your mom, by the way. I said, what did you think of that? With your son's dropping the F-bomb there, and she just kind of looked at me for a second, rolled her eyes a little bit, and went, I understood why he did it, why he had to do it, but I wasn't fond of it.
It's one of those things I feel like I'm proud of the use of that word there. Believe me, I've used it in my life at times that it maybe wasn't all that great. But I feel like in that moment, William Shakespeare, this sounds so pretentious, but William Shakespeare would have been proud of the way that we used that word because there was just no other word in the English language that could capture everything we needed to say in one word as we did right then and there.
Yep, I totally believe that. Shakespeare and George Carlin would have been proud of that. So.
George Carlin. What? Oh, man, I wish I could have met him.
So what did that do for you? I mean, immediately put your career on a new level, on a new trajectory and all. But what happened after that?
Yeah, so Iowa Nice happens, and we get over 1 million views, which at the time was national news.
Yeah.
Now, millions of videos are getting millions of views a day. But back then, going viral was a real big deal.
I was shocked when it was like, that was a guy from this area that did that?
and we did it 3 days before the Iowa caucus, so all the international media was there, and they had never covered an Iowa story like that. So I'm on Slovakian TV, for instance, doing interviews. And so right away, you have the challenge. There was no way to really monetize that at that time, so I'm still working at Wells Fargo. And eventually we figure out I don't want to do politics for the rest of my life. That sounds exhausting. And if you see the original Iowa Nice, if you look back at it now, it's kind of sort of become a thing. And that's the thing, going back, just tying up a loose end with that James Earl Jones thing, is that when you do art and you give it to the public, you have to understand that now it's theirs.
Yep, it's not yours anymore.
It's not yours anymore. So you have to, that, and you got to take it. And so eventually I wanted to get out of politics, and we went to sports, and where we made fun of, I thought it was really funny. Mark Twain would appreciate that, since in the original video we were making fun of everybody who was stereotyping us, that now the satirical thing to do, the Mark Twain thing to do, would be to stereotype everybody else.
Yep.
And so we do that, and we make fun of all the schools in the Big Ten and the Big 12 and Nebraska twice because it's too easy. And ESPN eventually puts us on the air. And, man, now we're cruising, but I'm still working at Wells Fargo. I can't quite figure out how to turn this into money. And that starts to change when people start inviting me to give speeches. Eventually people start asking me to make videos for them.
Did that kind of blow your mind a little bit when they started saying, hey, we want you to come talk to our group about what?
And this was the problem, is one of the reasons why I had needed to get away from the Iowa Nice guys. That character is so much more offensive than I am. He's so much more of a jerk, okay? And I'm not. And they would want the Iowa Nice guy. They wanted the Iowa Nice guy to come and give a speech. But I'm like, look, the Iowa Nice guy is going to give a speech for 90 minutes. You pay him for 45. He's going to say a couple F-bombs, drop the mic, and he's going to leave. Like, we have to figure out a thing here where I can show up and I can be a little bit more animated and goofy and carry a speech for 45 minutes. I'll still give you some of that. I know what you're looking for.
Yep.
And so once we sort of figured that line to walk, then I got speeches all over Iowa, and it was so cool because it's something I always wanted to do. I wanted to be a person who could speak on something that they are a champion of, and I am truly want to be a champion of this state. I want to be Iowa storyteller. At the end of my career, that's what I want to try to be, and that's kind of why I got started. Ultimately, money has always been the thing. I make a good living now, but I don't make the stupid amount of money that I need to make to be able to tell the stories I want to tell about Iowa in the way I want to tell them. And so that's why recently, almost 2 years ago now, I got involved in a tech startup in Iowa, which sounds crazy, but I think Iowa can do anything, and I think we can do a tech startup called Hoodoo, H-U-D-U, which, if it can take off, it's an odd job marketplace. If it does take off in the way that I think it can, then I will be able to produce the Jack Trice documentary the way I want to do it. I'll be able to tell the Kate Shelley story that I want to do in a dramatized version.
It's a means to an end.
Oh, absolutely. And now, granted, Hoodoo is something that I think can be great for all over. I think it's going to be great for people making ends meet and getting those stupid odd jobs you can't get done finally.
So explain Hoodoo real quick before we talk about Kinnick and things like that. Explain what exactly it is.
Yeah, so Hoodoo is it's the odd job marketplace we've all been looking for. Those jobs that you want to get done around the house that you can't get somebody to come over for unless you're going to pay them $300 or $500 to do something. My mom has this issue. She's a widow. She's got like a one little tile that's cracked on the front steps. It's a little dangerous. It's a tripping hazard, but you can't get somebody out there to do that. But on Hoodoo, what you can do is you download the app, H-U-D-U, you take a couple photos, you just write a couple sentences about what you want done, you post it, and then people will bid on it. And then you, as the lister, you decide who you want. There's no obligation. It's free to get the bids. You see what it is. If there's somebody, there might be a price you like, but not somebody you like, then you don't have to do it. Maybe you like somebody, but not the price. You can chat back and forth. You don't have to talk to anybody. You can just do it over text.
Yeah.
This is and with AI now being instituted, it will help you kind of build it out as well.
Has it gone statewide?
We are technically in the statewide, but we've only been able to put resources really into the Des Moines area. We've seen 300% growth over the last month or so. It's been incredible. It's really starting to take off. My hope is to eventually I think it's something that will really be able to help out rural Iowa, because it's just not like it used to be where all the men are handymen anymore. And you have these projects around town in your house where you just can't get them done, and you can't find. There maybe is that one or two handy guys that are left, or handy gals, but they're so busy you can't get them over
on bigger jobs, making more money somewhere else. But
yes, but and you maybe there's somebody that's good that's 20, 25 miles around. Wait, that's not very far here in rural Iowa. You list it there, people bid on it, and you get some good folks. We got a lot of veterans who are doers on our platform, and they do an incredible job.
Yeah.
Our founder's a veteran, Iraqi war veteran, so that's something he's very passionate about.
I can see that'd be great for somebody who just wants to help other people. You know, if you got the time on your hands, maybe you're retired, something like that. Boy, it's a great way to just help them. Yeah, you're going to make some money on the side of it too, but yeah, it's a phenomenal idea.
And the cool part is it's not just your handyman projects. It's really anything. If it's legal, you can list it. So we had a single dad who wanted to take his daughter to the daddy-daughter dance, but he didn't know how to do her hair. So he listed it on Hoodoo, and a lady bid on it. She came over, and then they went to the daddy-daughter dance, and they were able to have
now you're
going to
make me cry about this stuff.
And so that's the thing. It's just
that is cool.
Photography. Obviously, all the things around your house that you think of that are on your honey-do list or your must-do list or your to-do list, all that stuff can list it there. But once you realize, we never thought of that idea, the doing the hair, it's going to be incredible to see what people realize they can use the platform for that we haven't realized. Again,
you put it out there, they turned it into something that is useful for them. It now belongs to them again. So we got to talk about Kinnick. Huge project for you. Only 4 people put the whole thing together. It took you years to do and research, and what a monumental project. And we watched it the other night. We got Hawkeye fans. We're a Cyclone family here. So, but everybody just absolutely loved it. And we're just marveling at the intellect of Niles Kinnick. So a story we didn't really know. We knew who he was. He was a Heisman Trophy winner, whatever. And that was the least of his accomplishments that we were impressed with when we watched the movie.
Niall is an incredible human being, and the fact that we lost him in World War II, as we say in the documentary, he had a real chance to become an important American beyond being a football player and a great orator as he was during his Heisman speech. He could have been president, and I often wonder if Niall Kinnick could have survived World War II, how different this world would have been if the election wasn't the Republicans nominated, instead of Richard Nixon, Niall Clark Kinnick Jr. to be their president, their nominee for president. How different things like Vietnam would have gone, or certainly there would have been no Watergate if Niall Kinnick was your president. So it's he is a real loss, but the process itself, yes, was tremendous, tremendously long. It took 10 years. And a lot of research, a lot of starting and stopping, and again, it comes down to funding. It just is funding is the bane of a filmmaker's existence. That and audio, of course. But I need to solve that problem, so I don't want my projects to take 10 years anymore. Now, I'm happy it did for Kinnick because it eventually came out at the right time, and we were better filmmakers by the end of it. Mm-hmm. But I got a lot of stories to tell in the next half of my life, and it needs to happen faster. And that's why I gotta get the funding thing figured out, and that's what Hoodoo is going to be for me. The biggest thing you had to overcome was certainly the funding, right? Correct. Absolutely, and then figuring out how do we tell this incredible story in 90 minutes. The original cut of the film was over 2 hours. It was hard to spend all that time, 10 years putting that film together and then chopping out 30 minutes of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew we had
30
to do
minutes of your hard work and 10 years of your life.
Oh, and research. Some of it was the core research that we had done. But what happened is that we noticed when we put the film together that once Niall had passed away and we got into the legacy of Niall Kinnick, the film just felt different. And so we needed to back it off. And I think the film is much stronger at 90 minutes than it would have been at 2 hours and 2 minutes. And I am hopeful that we'll eventually get around to telling the Duke Slater story. We haven't started really on that. We have pieces of it, but Jack Trice is very close. Just got to get that funding down, and then that one shouldn't take more than maybe 6 months to complete. We've got all the filming done really that we need. So I'm really excited.
What was the holdup on that one? I know you had talked about it right away when Kinnick came out. You really wanted to do this, but you were having some different problems with that project.
Yeah. Kinnick, and it was originally going to be a film called Halls of Heroes, where it was going to be Niall and Jack's stories together, and we were going to dissect that and figure out why is it that we choose the heroes that we choose. But then once we got into discovering about both men and doing more research, there have been wonderful folks who have come before us, and we were able to stand on their shoulders to reach higher.
Mm-hmm.
But once we were able to start reaching higher, we were like, oh, my Lord, there is a lot here. And it was too much for one doc. Yeah. So we split them up
We're
into
not Ken
two.
Burns. We can't do a 9-part documentary.
That's right. And so we thought, well, the Niall one will be easier to do. It turns out we were probably wrong about that because there's so much more material about Niall that piecing together that archive was a Mount Everest climb. It was, and then taking all of that, the process of making it and turning it into this, all the writings that we read, all the aspects that we had collected together, putting all that into a big, thick script. And then going through that and being like, okay, chop, 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 chop. And then putting that edit together and then being like, oh, no, we got to chop that. It's a big, long process, but I'm so fortunate that I had Paul Benedict, who I mentioned before, with Iowa Nice, Christopher Cook, and Brendan Dunphy. You know, I can't say that we didn't bicker, but we were able to figure out one way or the other, for the sake of Niall's story, how to finally get that to the finish line. And it probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID shutting down all of my other sources of income and being like, well, I guess we have time. Let's work on this.
Got nothing else going on there. So how close is the Jack Trice documentary?
I'd say within a couple months, once I'm able to focus on Hoodoo is my main focus right now. But I'm very confident. A year ago now was the anniversary of Jack's the 100th anniversary of Jack's passing.
Yep.
And we were able to document all that. And then we went out to Ohio in the spring, shot some more. That's where he was from. Got some more stuff done. I mean, we just have stuff that nobody else will ever get. And we need to get that onto the screen for folks. And I'm not going to put a time frame on it because it's already been 12 years since I started. But I'm hopeful that soon, very soon, 2025 is
soon
my
is a
hope.
relative term there.
Yes.
So, by the way, what'd you think of the throwback uniforms that Iowa State did for the 100th anniversary?
I love them. I absolutely love them. I do enjoy
the pants I could have done with it because it looked like they weren't wearing pants at all. But the tops
tan.
were awesome.
The old khaki look of the pants. I love the aims on the side of the helmet. I'm a sucker for a white helmet anyway. I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, so I have that suckerness in me. But,
Bills Mafia.
Yep, that's right. It was a nice. I like the jerseys. I love seeing the bars be kind of a thing that I'm seeing kids wear now. I hope that they fully realize what they're wearing. The university has done a good job of highlighting Jack, and I hope that our documentary not only leads to more attention for Jack, but that it would eventually lead to me producing a dramatized version of his life the same way I'd love to do that for Niall. So I'm going to come back. I just have to get so rich I have a lot of money I can just throw around, John.
It's the one thing standing in the way.
The first thing that I'm going to do if Hoodoo hits, though, is I'm buying my mom, Janie Siepker, any beach house in the world. I've told her this. She's like, oh, you don't have to do that. I'm like, Mom, look, you worked at the Carroll Can Redemption Center for 25 years. I know what that was like. You've earned this. So we'll see.
I bet she doesn't. She's not leaving Mount Carmel.
You know, I kind of hope not. I don't know what I would do, in all honesty, if I don't have that anchor point on this planet of that house at Mount Carmel. My grandmother grew up in that house. To have that legacy. I know that there will be a time. Again, of course, in case I just become so rich that I can just buy the house myself, turn it into a little museum. Why not? Museum of Mount Carmel.
It can be whatever. If you're that rich, you can do whatever you want to do.
That's right. But I really I'm just so thankful for everything that it's all the things, the highs and lows of my life. It just wouldn't change anything.
Well, if you're not busy enough with doing the Jack Trice documentary and with Hoodoo and some of that other stuff, you also started a little podcast network. The Gig podcast network, right?
Yeah,
and I've seen it online. It's a pretty cool idea again.
Yeah. So we got Murph and Andy, the Murph and Andy radio show. Andy Fales, Keith Murphy. You might know them, any of our listeners, if they watch Channel 13.
Sure.
I certainly grew up watching Keith on Sound Off. I can't believe he's become one of my best friends and my mentor. He is. You asked me before about the people who have been effective on influential in my life, and on the Mount Rushmore of male figures, Keith Murphy is there, along with Kevin Tigas and my father, and Patrick Gowron, as I mentioned before, and. I'm so lucky, but we just left doing terrestrial radio on KXNO and went with a new network called Iowa Everywhere.
Yep.
And
Chris Williams.
Chris Williams, Chris Hassel. And so we have our show there. We just had our second show yesterday, and it's really fun now. I mean, I dropped the first F-bomb in the history of the Murph and Andy show. And
the ceremonial throwing out of the first F-bomb.
Keith, I didn't tell Keith I was going to do that, and the look he gave me, oh my goodness, it was so funny, but he was really mad at me. And Fales is just laughing. He's like, no, I wanted it to be me. So I got one in. And so maybe that'll be one of the things I'll be known for forever. But
see, Murphy's like me. Is like, it's been ingrained forever. You don't say that stuff on the air. So I would really have to bite hard to do that.
Yes, you have to be careful because you get
on
in front
purpose.
Because
I've done it by accident.
Oh yes, a hot mic. Ooh.
I have said every combination of swear word possible all at once on the air one time, and that's a whole other story.
Well, we'll have to do a podcast about that.
That was interesting. But Keith Murphy again. He's one of those guys that everybody raves about. You know, everybody's got a story about how Keith helped them out, and I'm sure he's got his detractors. Everybody in broadcasting does. You better have a thick skin, otherwise you just get out of the business. They're going to criticize what you do, but the people, the professionals that are in the business, respect him.
Respect, absolutely. He is the quintessential Midwest sportscaster.
Mm-hmm.
He is the guy who ESPN offered, and he said, you know what? I think life here in my small community of Iowa is better. I think my way of life here is better. I think I'm going to be happier. Not many folks can live their life with that wisdom.
Yeah.
And he's such a giver. He is an incredible assessor of talent, and then being able to figure out how to get the best out of folks. He is truly, he's one of the most incredible human beings I've ever met. He's so kind and giving.
He's got a great sense of humor too. He just knows. He's got great comedic timing.
He is Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. I like old things. Jerry Lewis was always the funny one. Dean Martin didn't get as many of the laughs, but Jerry is not nearly as funny if it's not for Dean being that straight guy. Mm-hmm. And Keith has figured that out over the years. Like Keith, with Hassel and Fales, he's funny. He's so funny, but he knows that if he sets those guys up, it's going to be even funnier. So he knows how to play the straight guy so well. He is a brilliant, brilliant, beautiful man.
All right, we're gonna let you get going here in a quick minute, but we're gonna have to do this again.
Let's do it.
When the hoodoo hits big and when Jack Trice comes out.
And honestly, I really want to have a Carol plan because I want hoodoo. I want to. We'll figure it out. We got to get there's also fundraising that goes into a tech startup, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So once we have our lead investor and we have some more to play with, I definitely want to come back to Carol, and I want to see if my idea of hoodoo being able to really help out a smaller community could happen. So stay tuned. Love to be pulling some ads and doing some stuff like that. So.
Hey, if I could ever help you, just call me. Now you got my number.
All right.
All right, quick questions time here.
Yes,
Random questions. What's your go-to cocktail if you're going to go out?
Old-fashioned.
Old-fashioned.
Yep.
And who would you want to have an old-fashioned with? I mean, who is it that you would? I know Kinnick would be an obvious answer, things like that. But
I know this is going to seem a little lame, but having a cocktail with Keith Murphy is honestly one of the coolest things that I've ever gotten to do in my life. But to go beyond that, there's so many people.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably. I love presidential history, like it's one of my main hobbies. So if I could go back and have a cocktail with Abraham Lincoln, I'd love to do that. If alive, gosh, it's such a good question. I wanted to give you a really thoughtful answer. I'd probably go Steve Martin.
Steve Martin.
I love Steve Martin.
Yeah,
Jeff Daniels. Those types of actors who are not just comedic or serious actors, but deep, deep thinkers.
Mm-hmm. How many pairs of shoes do you own? Are you a shoe guy?
Okay, so when I went through my divorce 4 years ago, I thought, of course, it's because my fashion is not very good. So I thought maybe a lady will like me if I have more cool shoes. So I got a bunch of boots and different types.
Clearly,
of
your footwear game was not up to
I know that's what
up to
it
par.
Was. And so I have way more now. I'm gonna say I have like 20 pairs. I got like 5 pairs of boots at this point, and then probably 15 pairs of, two sandals, some workout shoes, a lot of casual Nikes and Adidas, those types of things.
What time do you wake up in the morning? Is it always the same time every day?
Recently, I've changed 5 a.m. as the time that I've been getting up. But if I let myself go, it's like, if I had, let's just say, no alarm, Scott would probably naturally go to bed around 2 or 3 in the morning and wake up around 9:30 or 10 in the morning. That is not how society works, however.
Nope.
So 5 a.m. the alarm goes off.
So, but you got to have the alarm. You're not the person who just wakes up at that time.
No, God, no. The hardest thing I do every day is get out of bed.
And what's the first thing you do after that?
I go pee. And then I brush.
Okay, after that.
And then I drink. Then I drink 2 big full glasses of water. Then I brush my teeth. And then after that, then I will meditate for 20 minutes. Then I go to the gym. And then I come home. I have my shake, my protein shake, and I'm started for the day. That's my morning routine.
So you do exactly what they tell us to do, is drink water right away in the morning to do all this stuff.
I've never had a cup of coffee in my life.
Haven't you?
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I've recently been thinking about starting to do it. Just drinking black coffee seems to be quite just fine and healthy, and the caffeine really does help with some focus. And as you might be able to tell from this conversation, I might have a little problem with that. But so I have been recently considering it. I also love traveling the world, and coffee culture is something that is important to. I've just missed out on that.
Yeah.
But no, water for me. The thing I haven't done that feel like I'm getting close to actually doing is after I do that glass of water and brush my teeth, it's cold plunge time.
Oh.
I haven't started doing it yet. I'm a little scared. It seems terrible, but all the benefits, the dopamine rush and stuff, something that I struggle with regulating, all that sort of things in my brain. I don't know. It seems so hard, though.
I don't know if there's a caffeine drink out there that could equal jumping into an ice bath.
Have you ever done that?
No.
Oh, gosh.
No.
Okay, maybe next time.
Quote a line from your favorite movie.
Well, the one that just popped in my head is go back to England, tell them that Scotland's brothers and sisters are free. That's from Braveheart. But the one that just comes to mind for me is from my favorite movie. It's not the best movie ever, but Midnight in Paris. And they're just a couple quotes about suffering from golden age thinking, suffering from thinking the past is always better than the present. And I suffer from that golden age thinking, that nostalgia. And so I often, when I think about that, and you could even hear it in the way I talk about past in this podcast, is remembering those lines and being like, no, actually, right now is the best time. Right now, because I'm here and I'm with these people. I'm having this great conversation with you and this 18-year-old cat who's just been laying here watching us the whole time. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's
Mo,
incredible.
the cat, has been here with us the whole time, sleeping throughout the whole thing, so we have not been entertaining enough to keep her awake. But
I always try to keep this line in my head is, I'll be back.
Terminator.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a good philosophy.
I was thinking Hamilton, what they always talk about, what a great time to be alive.
Oh,
you
yes.
know, and throughout
Yes.
that show. So, video games or board games? I mean, if you're an old school guy, you
my
got to go
gosh.
board games, right?
Well, I like a few video games, but I am a big nerd when it comes to board games. I think people might say I take it a little too much. Like, I go to board game conferences. John, I don't know if I should reveal this, but so like I play games that you probably might not have heard of. My favorite game is Twilight Struggle. It is a two-person simulation of the Cold War. One player plays as the Americans, one plays as the Soviets, and you play through history, and it is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Get riveting there, all the different
the
scenarios.
Choices that you get. Like, what I love in a board game is interesting choices. And so like a game like Monopoly, there are no interesting choices to make. You roll the dice, there's no choice there. You land on a spot, there's no choice there, and you buy the property, there's no choice there. I love games with great choices, and then War of the Ring is my other super favorite game. If you're a Lord of the Rings fan, this is a two-person simulation of the Fellowship of the Ring, and it is absolutely awesome. And I also like non-serious board games like Wavelength, family games. They're really fun too.
All right, last question I got for you. Growing up in the Midwest, I grew up in Pierce, South Dakota, and you grew up in Mount Carmel. One of the real pleasures after I got out a little bit older were blizzard days. Everything shuts down. Man, you can't go anywhere. You can't hardly do anything. What'd you do on blizzard days?
We, woke up and felt like it was a second Christmas. But what we would do is we would make little home videos. We'd tell stories. We'd make up things. We'd have one of the Tigges. We didn't have a camcorder, the Siepkers, but my neighbors, the Tiggeses, Kevin Tigges, they had to have a little camcorder. So we would come up with little scenarios, and we would all have characters, and then we try and tell a little story and figure out how to edit in the camera. Like if you needed to cut to black, we didn't know how to actually do that, so we just like put our hand in front of it quickly. We would just create. We would just have. It would be us and the Tigges boys, us 5 kids, and we'd create something or we'd pretend we were the new kids on the block, and we'd do dances, whatever it may be.
Whatever came into your head, popped into your head.
It was a day of imagination.
It was one of the great times I remember growing up in the Midwest.
Absolutely.
And people on the West Coast will never understand that out there. So
seasonality is so important, I think, to who we become as people. And winters, there is something just ecological about how important our winters are with those hard freezes, where we do get that fresh start every spring. Winter like that for us people is the same. Like it brings us closer together to those people who we are closest to, because it's cold outside and we got to get closer. And so we kind of get this hard reset every spring. And I think it's a really important. I think winter is just people think of it as the dead time, but it's really where we get that chance to have that rebirth.
It took us months to get together, but man, totally worth it. I appreciate
Absolutely.
your time.
Let's do it again.
Phenomenal time talking to you.
You
Scott
asked great
Siepker.
questions.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate the
that.
thoughtfulness.
I put very little thought into them. I just kind of listened to you and
well,
just
you
react
say
to
that, but also, how many years have you been interviewing people?
I just have my 30th anniversary at Carroll Broadcasting.
So you say you didn't put any time in thinking about it, but it's for 30 years you've been showing up to work, putting in the work, and that's why you're able to do it in such a natural, honest, authentic way now. Give yourself some credit, John.
I will. But yeah, it's funny because the people at the station, they posted it online, and a ton of people were very gracious and said congratulations on 30 years, and wow, that's that doesn't happen very often and things like that. The people at the station would sit in my office going, 30 years, that's a really damn long time, and I'm like, dropping the Iowa nice guy, the F-bomb. I was like, being around 30 years, like just showing up doesn't count. You got to make an impact.
Yeah.
So that's hopefully,
and I think
try
you
to
have.
do that. And you're making an impact with all this stuff, and can't wait to see Jack Trice, the documentary.
I am very excited. I'm as excited to see it as you. I can't wait.
Scott Siepker joining us today here is on Must Know People.